You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network. Visit pencilandpaperproductions.podbean.com to find more great podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to... Look, I know we didn't necessarily agree on it, but I have been thinking Cinema Salsa needs to be the name. That was such a good name. When I heard it back, I was like, damn, that was good. That was really good. No one's got it.
I mean,
no one's got it.
I'm okay with Cinema Salsa, but I'm kind of smitten with one of your suggestions that came after the podcast, which was our film podcast has no name. But Cinema Salsa, I guess that works too.
It does. I mean, there was that. I did kind of throw that out there because I was like, we don't have a name. Is anyone else doing this? I would hope not. But you know what? Something tells me if I did some digging, someone has done that. Being like, well, I don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
Just like we were.
That's a kind of a cop-out.
I'm
just kidding. I do like Cinema Salsa.
It's good. So I think we're going to be called Cinema Salsa. If we're not called Cinema Salsa by the time you're listening to this, then, again, we came up with something much, much better. Unless you want to tell us that we didn't. But I'm your host, Stephen White. With me, as always, is Philip Peck. You know, I wanted to talk to you about some stuff. First and foremost, what you've been watching this week, because I had some stuff that I wanted to talk about that I watched. But I want to hear what you've been watching.
Well, I kind of had a light week in terms of watching. We talked about on our first podcast, which, well, I don't know. I guess none of these have gone up yet, so maybe this will be the first podcast. But anyway, we have talked about, I watched Saint Maud. So I finished watching that. Mm-hmm. And I also started watching The Underground Railroad, which I had mentioned watching or wanting to watch the last time. And those are really the only two things that I've completed. Well, I haven't completed The Underground Railroad, but I've completed like 4 episodes of it. Mm-hmm. And I finished Saint Maud. So those are really the only two things. And I feel bad. So.
But you said Saint Maud kind of...
It shook me a little bit. It was...
a little bit.
Yeah, there was I mean, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it goes places. And again, I talked about not being a huge horror fan, so maybe other people might think that I'm a baby. But yeah, there was this one part, like kind of the penultimate scene, the denouement, whatever you call it. It really like made my skin crawl. So that was like a very visceral bodily reaction that I had to the movie, and I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's what you want from, movies or whatever art or culture thing that you're kind of consuming, I guess. But just to get a visceral reaction, that's noteworthy. So I appreciated it.
Yeah, movies like that, there are, I guess, the reaction you got, you're appreciative of it in the right way. Mm-hmm. I know some movies do shock for shock value, and I do not appreciate that, especially when you're trying to do something that just makes you go like, what? It
wasn't, this scene wasn't shocking. I think it was well earned, and just the kind of the twist that it took, because I had no idea what was going to happen. Like it was leading up to this moment, and you knew there was going to be this confrontation, but you didn't know how it was going to play out. And the turn that it took, I mean, it wasn't like the most original thing in the world, but I think it was well earned, and it just creeped me out, and I liked it. I mean...
See, and that's good. That's good. Because I don't think a lot of movies not a lot of them earn those moments to where that shock is just like, oh, yeah, gosh, that was just so good. So I'm going to have to give this a watch. I have noticed it being advertised on Amazon, and I'm like,
yeah.
All right, I'm going to have to... I'll get around to it. I felt like I watched a lot, but I don't feel like I did.
Yeah.
It's like in spurts. First of all, like I've mentioned before, and I'll probably mention this for a while until it goes into its hibernation season. The Last Drive-In is such a joy. Especially, this is that show that's on Shudder where they do like 2 movies, horror movies. And like, even if you're not into horror movies, when they have guests on and they're talking about their process, the filmmaking process, that's always a treat for me. It might not be for other people who are watching, but I love it. I love hearing those little behind-the-scenes stuff. This week, or last week, whenever it came out, whenever this comes out, you know what I'm talking about. They were talking to William Lustig, Bill to his friends, and Bruce Campbell. And they were doing a double feature of Maniac Cop 1 and 2, which, I mean, they're what they are. They're fun-ish horror movies that don't take them too seriously. I mean, Bruce Campbell, that should tell you enough.
He's in those.
Yeah, he's really in the first one, kind of has more like a extended cameo in the second one.
Yeah.
But they're fun movies, and the schlock that kind of comes along with them. If you know who Larry Cohen is, king of schlock, back in the 70s and 80s, the stuff he would do to make a movie, he was like guerrilla filmmaking at its finest, really trying to cut every corner. You know, he didn't go out and get, what do you call them? Licenses or
Permits.
Permits. There you go, permits. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word permit. It was there. But he didn't go and get permits. He was just like, no, just go down the street, go shoot it, and be done with it. And what's interesting about it is William Lustig was talking about one of the shots in Maniac Cop 2, and I didn't think about it at the time, but it was so true. It was a shot from, I think it was the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's kind of a pan shot just of the skyline, and you're seeing traffic go by, and then it pans over to something, funny enough, kind of like Out of Annie Hall. Is how he described it, just kind of a weird thing in the middle of the night, but you're doing this bridge shot, this two serial killers walking side by side. Really weird, but that's the kind of vibe he was going for. But the shot is just New York.
Yeah.
And he said you don't see that anymore. You don't see these shots of New York anymore because everyone's shooting in Vancouver or LA and they're swapping it. He's like, but all these shots, as many as we could, it's like they knew the neighborhoods. They grew up there. He said, we wanted to make sure New York was in the movie when we could. And I was just sitting there thinking, you can see, and you can, if you've watched enough of these movies where they take place in New York, you can see a difference.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't have that same feel. But New York's got a feel to it. It's got a soul to it. And you can really tell. And,
especially back in the day.
Yeah, especially back then. So it was just, I hadn't thought about it until he brought it up, and I was like, you're absolutely right. That is insane to think about, but it's true. So it was nice to hear him talk about the movie that he directed, some of the movies he directed. Bruce Campbell, he's just a joy at any point in time, just to hear him go on and on about his stuff.
I think that would be a good idea for another show, is like where the location is like such a prominent part of the film, it almost becomes a character in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think, I kind of resonates with me, like this more specific, almost regional filmmaking, I think is pretty interesting. And yeah, we don't get that, like you mentioned, a lot of stuff is subbed, shot in different places, and it's, standing in for New York or standing in for wherever. They build a lot of sets in Atlanta that are supposed to be, anywhere in the world, Japan even. I mean, how Atlanta doesn't look anything like Japan, but,
No.
every Marvel movie is pretty much shot there now, so they, make it work. But you lose that specificity. It just looks like a set,
Yeah. It's you actually made me think of something else we'll talk about. We'll get to it, but I like your idea. I want to stick with that. Another thing I did watch, and I was kind of hoping maybe you had said you watched this movie. I don't even know why I did it, because in the back of my head I was like, you know what? This is probably not a good idea, but I did it anyway. I watched Army of the Dead.
Yeah. I wanted to watch it, or like I knew I should watch it, but I just didn't have the time, or maybe the interest, because I'm just not a big Zack Snyder fan. But
thank you, because I hear it all the time where it's just like, oh, he's such a visionary filmmaker. Oh my God, this movie I think finally helped me realize what I don't like about him. Okay, because I'll give him credit for his 4-hour-long Justice League movie or whatever. It was, in theory, better than the Joss Whedon abortion that came out. Because that movie was just, I was so mad. I was so mad with that movie, and I don't even know why. I was mad at Batman vs. Superman because I wanted to see a great movie with these two iconic characters together, and it was just not what I wanted, or it's not, I don't know what I wanted exactly, but it wasn't that.
Yeah.
It just wasn't true to the characters. And so when I watched the Snyder Cut. Obviously, 4 hours is a lot to ask of somebody. But I watched it and I was like, this was arguably better.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't give him a lot of credit in the overhaul. Like, this doesn't make up for all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But this was arguably better than the thing that I watched before, even though it was twice as long. Army of the Dead made me realize visually he can work a camera. He can make some shots. He can do choreography like crazy and make it pop. And it's just action packed. And then you throw some music behind it and a great editor and you've got some magic. Mm-hmm. You got some entertaining stuff. But when it comes to a narrative, he doesn't know what he's doing at all. Because the longer I sat in the movie, you'd see trope after trope after trope. Yeah. That you've seen in so many other movies, but he thought, man, this is a great one. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. But then the tropes set up these character arcs that don't pay off. Then you have these plot points that make no sense. Like in the moment, you're like, oh, okay. And then you hit a speed bump, and you're like, wait a minute. And then you start to think about it, and then that leads to other plot holes that don't make any sense. And it's just one after another until you're just sitting there going, my God, what is going on here? And then by the time it was all over, you realize that the entire movie was pointless. It was just a way for everybody to die. I know that might be spoilerish, but just follow me here for the moment. It was just a way for everybody to die, hypothetically. But that's how I felt. That's how I felt when I watched it. I was like, so this is just a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like, and I'm not a big, I haven't even seen a lot of his movies. I've seen 300. I don't think I've seen any of the DC movies because I'm just not into it. And
don't do it. Don't. I'm not going to tell you to subject yourself to it. Good for you.
I was interested. I think the thing that piqued my interest was the fact that they had to remove an actor in post and then shoot, and then hired Tig Notaro, bizarrely, to take his place, and then filmed her whole thing like in front of a green screen, and then composited her into the movie. I wanted to see that. How did that work? That's impressive. Yeah,
that is so impressive.
So
because
he's a technical filmmaker. I think he's kind of like Christopher Nolan in a way to me. But I'm kind of like assuming a lot because I haven't really watched a lot of his films. Mm-hmm. But the visuals are important and they are dynamic and they're like striking in a lot of ways. And just the way he films, like the colors, like in 300, are very desaturated and almost like there's this real contrast and stuff like that. But and then all the slow-mo. So that's fine. And it seems like you mentioned, like the story is kind of like it's just stitching all these set pieces together in a way that serves the purpose, but it doesn't exactly leave you wanting more or being impressed in any way. It's just like, okay, I watched some stuff happen, and that's pretty much it.
And it was entertaining stuff to watch, but narratively, it was just. I was just, my brain was hurting. I was like, man, what? Like, for example, now, typically in a movie, when you hear something said or you kind of see something done, it almost sounds like a setup. Mm-hmm. Like they're saying something as kind of foreshadowing. It's like, well, when this happens, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, I'm going to remember that because I'm going to come back to that because you just foreshadowed something really cool happening. And they did this 3 or 4 times and nothing happened. And you think, again, it's not something you think about in the moment, but when you kind of rewind and you're like, so why did you even bring this up? Why did you bring this plot point? One in particular, and this is not a big spoiler. It's not a spoiler at all because nothing happened. They come into Vegas. And you see just like these piles of rotted, dried up husks of zombies. And then just like, so what is this? It's like, this is them. These are the zombies. This is what's left of them after they've been kind of sitting out in the heat and drying up. Mm-hmm. It's like, wait until it rains. And be like, oh shit, is it going to rain? Never rains. So, I mean, you get this idea. You get this image in your head. Like,
that's for the sequel.
Yeah. And they're building a universe. That's another thing we're going to talk about is building a universe.
Please don't build a universe, Zach.
They're already doing it. Spinoffs, prequels.
The Netflix money.
Animated, yeah, that's what it is. But yeah, I don't want to say don't watch it because it's entertaining. Turn off your brain. That's all I can tell you. You'll probably enjoy it a hell of a lot more if you do that.
Yeah,
because there was some good stuff. The Tig Notaro stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm almost positive I read that's what they did, but I forgot about it. Like I put it away.
So you didn't even notice. Like it was pretty seamless.
Like I'm sitting there watching it, and my sister had kind of watched it before me. And she's like, "Dude, check this out." And she's like, "Oh, and the Tig Notaro stuff." And that's what she was talking about, but I didn't press. And I was like, "Yeah." And I was just like, "I don't know what she's talking about, but I'll just watch it and just pretend like I know what she's talking about."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there waiting for her, looking, and it's like, what does she do? And then I'm not seeing anything. And I was like, all right, well.
It's so weird because, she had to, she was the only one on set. And, it was Zack Snyder, the cinematographer, and, however many crew people had to be there. But she was acting all alone and pretending, to be interacting with whatever's going on in the movie.
For that technical marvel alone, I would recommend checking it out. Because, again, she's a great actress. And her being in the movie because of that one thing, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I watched MODOK. Have you heard of MODOK?
I haven't heard of that.
Kind of think Marvel characters meet Robot Chicken. It's fun. It's fine. It's Patton Oswalt. It's hit or miss. It's kind of fun. I'll say that. I'm not.
I do love Patton Oswalt. So
then I think you'll like this. There were actually a few callbacks to things that I've been kind of checking out with my wife that she's not been familiar with. And I was so happy. I was like, holy shit, this actually paid off in spades just for a joke on a show. Because I had been taking her back in time with me to shows that I like. And she got a joke simply because we'd been rewatching this old show. And I was like, thank you. That's the kind of payoff I'm looking for here. But if you like Patton Oswalt and you like his humor.
Where is that kind of available?
Hulu.
Oh, it's on Hulu.
Yeah.
I don't have Hulu.
So, maybe get you one of those $5 plans. Get you some commercials.
Yeah, well, they do have the free version, but I have signed. We've had Hulu in the past, but we've let it go.
Yeah, it's fine.
But I was thinking too, like in researching today's topic, talking about streaming and versus in theaters. Is it okay if I go here real quick? We don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
And VOD. I was just thinking to myself, like, what are all the streaming services or the streaming platforms? Clearly, there are too many to list on the show, and it's not even interesting. But I saw an article where Starz just hit 16.7 million subscribers, and that was kind of surprising to me. But because I think Starz is available on Amazon or via Amazon,
and you can also. Same with Hulu. You can do those package deals, kind of like cable packages, HBO, Showtime, Starz. Mm-hmm. You can add those on to your Hulu package.
But Starz is owned by Lionsgate Entertainment, and the growth in Starz really helped to bolster Lionsgate's bottom line because they lost money in 2020. Mm-hmm. But if they didn't have Starz growing or the growth with Starz, they would have lost much more money than they otherwise would have. And now there's speculation that Starz is going to get bought out or Lionsgate's going to get bought out by one of the bigger Amazon, because Amazon just bought MGM for like $8.5 billion.
Yeah, what? And that's not even talking about the shift at Warner, the AT&T merger are they merging Warner Media with Discovery?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly, Discovery and Warner. So AT&T's like getting out of the management of it, I guess. Maybe not the ownership. I'm not really sure, but yeah.
Yeah, it almost seemed like they were still maintaining some ownership, but it's like they didn't want to worry about that anymore. They're like, here, you take it, and we're going to go back over here and play with our phones.
Right.
You can have this. So yeah, a lot of interesting shakeups, and I didn't realize that. I guess I probably knew at some point that Lionsgate had owned Starz, but I didn't realize they were hemorrhaging that bad. Like they were hurting.
Well, yeah, because the theater business was locked down for the majority of 2020, so there was huge losses, both with theaters, of course, and then with the studios. But with the proliferation of all these streaming services, I'm worried that there's just too many options, and that's not something that consumers typically worry about. It's supposed to be beneficial to have more options than less, but also there is a point where there are too many, and we don't want all the confusion. So Yeah, and I was thinking about like Lionsgate. What do they have? Lionsgate has Hunger Games, they have Twilight, they've got the Saw series, they've got John Wick. These are pretty big IPs, pretty big gets for somebody who I don't know if
I
it's
could probably
worth.
do without.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth a subscription to Stars, but I don't know what kind of original programming they have. But there's just so much, and
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'll even go out on a limb about Stars. They had a deal on Hulu where they were just like, hey, if, $5 extra for 6 months and you can get Hulu for $5. And I was like, you know what? Okay. I said, let's see what they got. I literally went on there and I'm seeing all these movies. And look, they're good movies. They're big movies. And this is probably what's drawing a lot of people in because they have a lot of big hits, if you will. Just the big blockbusters that everybody wants to go see. If I wanted to see them, I either have them or I've seen them and I don't want to watch it again. And when you thumb through the library, I've maybe seen 1 or 2 movies that I'm like, oh, I really want to watch that. But I haven't got around to it because I don't think about it. And this may be beneficial to some people, but as you were kind of saying, there's just so much out there that it's hard to keep track of what's out there for you to watch, what you want to watch. And I do find myself being a little bit choosier.
mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to just watch this because, someone said, oh, dude, this is the greatest show on television right now. And then everybody and 20, 50 other people are saying the same thing. Maybe it's not for me. And I would like to focus my time and attention on stuff that I know I will enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope they would do the same, not just be sheep and do what everybody else is saying. You know what I'm saying?
And the tricky thing, too, I think, is with these big mergers, like Disney bought the rights to Fox and HBO and Warner Brothers or AT&T. Whereas before, think about like HBO's cable service, you have, or even Netflix to think, like movies come and go. Like they have like a window where they will be available on this platform and then they'll go away. And they might pop up on a different platform. But you don't subscribe necessarily to Netflix because they have MGM's back catalog. Because I don't think the majority of people have an affiliation with particular movie studios. They have an affiliation with movies, but it's not because it's like an MGM movie or a Lionsgate movie. They don't know who produced the movies. So it's worrisome if all of these different movies get locked behind specific streaming services. So you can only see the movie you really want to see if you subscribe to Stars, and you can only see the movie you want to see if you subscribe to HBO Max or whatever the case is. Whereas in the past, the movies would pop up randomly on different platforms, but now it's like they're getting locked behind specific streaming services, and I think that's a little bit worrisome.
I mean, I'd say Disney would have been the start of that, if anybody, because they are essentially saying, we are Disney, and everything Disney is right here.
Right.
And even though that's
fine because it's Disney,
right?
And Disney has such a huge brand, and now they're branching out, but they make Disney movies, and it wasn't even live action until recently. But now their live action movies are just remakes of their animated movies, so it makes sense if you have that brand. But there's not a Lionsgate brand. People don't go to the movies to watch a Lionsgate film; they just go to watch the movie. What sucks though is that Disney is now owns the Fox back catalog. So is that the only place you can go to watch those movies? And I think that's where it's going to get hard.
I have kind of wondered that myself, especially, and I don't want to go off topic too much with this because this could be its own thing, and I don't understand why you would do this. Why put a movie on your service if you're going to edit it? You know what I'm saying? Because they've been doing that with some of their movies that are okay or family friendly at the time. Splash is the one that I can think of right off the top of my head, where Daryl Hannah, if you've never seen the movie, she was a mermaid. She met Tom Hanks because he's so charming, grew legs, and they had a relationship, but then she had to go back into the ocean. And obviously, being a mermaid who grew legs, there's going to be a little nudity, I mean, we all have a, backside, and they just showed her backside. And it wasn't gratuitous. It just shot here and there. But Disney thought, oh, you can't do that. So they digitally added hair
Wow.
to cover her backside in a few shots. And I'm like, why?
That's interesting.
Why? Yeah, why is it? It's not like it was anything inappropriate.
And I think it was a PG-13 rated movie. I mean, I've seen that movie multiple times. When I was a kid, but I haven't seen it since.
If you watch it on Disney Plus,
that's interesting. And another thing related, not to get too crazily off topic, but I saw too that Cruella opens tomorrow in theaters, and simultaneously is going to be available on Disney Plus for $30. But Disney doesn't allow smoking in their films. They instituted a smoking ban back in like 2007 or something, and then it's gone into the Marvel movies and whatever else they own. Nobody can smoke on screen. Yeah. So that was a huge thing with Cruella de Vil. Always had that cigarette holder and the cigarette. They can't do that anymore. And the actress, damn it, I just lost her name. Emma Stone. She was like, I don't know how, I couldn't get into the character because I just felt like I needed to have that cigarette.
Well, I mean, if that's what works. But I mean, that right there kind of brings us back to our, I guess, back around, segues into our main theme, our main topic, theaters versus streaming. We have so much in the streaming. And because of COVID, we've had this, I really don't want to say like a surge, but I guess it's been a necessity in a way that studios have been kind of putting some of their theatrical releases on to their streaming platforms, where Disney seemed to kind of limit it to a lot of their Pixar stuff. They did that stuff for free, or I guess I don't want to say free.
Cost of the subscription got you the movie.
Right. And then when it came to Mulan, I think that was the first one where they actually started to charge the $30 premium if you wanted to watch it there, because no one had... I don't think that actually went to theaters kind of like Cruella is. Cruella is kind of like day and date kind of deal. So
like what Warner's doing with HBO.
Yeah, now Warner, that's an entirely different beast, because I honestly feel like they're kind of giving those movies away if you're already there on HBO Max. But it does raise the question, and I think a lot of people have been concerned about this, and I can understand why. Does this spell doom for theaters? Like, theaters themselves have kind of been on the decline, which I've heard this, and I know that there are theaters that have been closing around the country, even before this. But I really don't want to feel like, I don't feel that theaters are going to die because of this. I know they're taking a hit, and I know that there's been a lot of stuff like Regal, AMC, they've been struggling financially because, again, no one's going, and I get it. But if they can just hang in there, I truly feel people will come back to the cinema. But I can't argue in favor of the streaming. So you tell me, because I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but you tell me where you kind of stand with it all.
There is something about going to the theater, and I don't think that's something you can replace with TV or with streaming at in your home. It has been thinned out, even before COVID, it was thinning out just the kinds of things that were getting made, the movies that were getting released, and even though box office was up, ticket sales are down just because there's just not as many movies getting released or getting made anymore and being shown in theaters. It's like they're all going towards big blockbuster movies. And I do think that was hurting the viability of the movies. And I don't necessarily have, or the viability of theaters. I don't have numbers to back this up, but they're raising prices across the board because there's just fewer movies to go see any given month. They're just not making as many, so they have to make the money on the fewer movies that are actually being released. So ticket prices are up, concession prices are up. You can even see it in the theater themselves. There's fewer physical seats in the theaters. Now they're all big recliners as opposed to... So there's literally fewer available spots in the theater to go see the movies because there's just not that as many people are going anymore. So there definitely was a decline, but I do feel like that decline was had something to do with the shift in the studio business or in the studio mindset of shifting all their resources into these massive blockbusters as opposed to allocating blockbuster money, mid-level money, and then low budget money for different movies to fill in the gaps. So they don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Do you feel like this happened within the last decade, maybe 2 decades?
Yeah, well, I think the seeds had been planted back in the 90s when you had those massive movies like Armageddon, ID4, these movies that were like pushing maybe not $1 billion, but adjusted for inflation, probably $1 billion box office hauls. And I feel like that sort of set the tone. And then they just went all in, starting probably with the Marvel movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really the turning point where Iron Man was huge, and then the MCU took off, and those movies have made billions of dollars, and they've made more money than the Star Wars reboot. But Star Wars reboot, I think, as a consequence or as a result of the success that Marvel had, those movies take $300 million to produce. Whereas before, a big budget blockbuster was $100 million, and that left you with $200 million to make other movies. But now that one movie takes $300 million, there's no more money left over for anything else. So they've put all of their eggs in this one basket. And so far it's worked. There haven't been, even if the movies aren't critically well regarded, there's still enough people buying the tickets. And especially the overseas sales have grown massively as well. So it's not even just domestic box office, it's this international box office that they're chasing. And they have to make these movies palatable to different cultures and not offend anybody. And I think this is the business model that they're focused on right now. And until it busts, and it must, I feel like it will eventually bust. Mm-hmm. But until it does, I think this is what we're going to see.
With the Marvel brand and how they're doing things, I do agree that there's gonna be a breaking point. When it comes, I don't know. I'm grateful as a fan of those comics and
yeah,
stuff
and
like
it's
that.
not to, and I'm not dogging these movies. I've enjoyed several of the Marvel movies, but I do think, but I'm just talking about the business strategy that has kind of consumed the industry.
Yeah.
And you've seen it, they've tried to launch what was the monster movie universe,
the dark universe, yeah,
right? That that was only because of what Marvel had done, and the DC universe, which has had its ups and downs, but by and large has been successful, even if it's not as loved or beloved as what Marvel has done. And then Disney with the relaunch of the Star Wars franchise, and even Disney, you see, like, they're not making original movies anymore. They're just rehashing their animated movies in live action form.
No, yeah, that's true. I mean, and yeah, I'm not dogging, and I didn't want to imply that you were dogging.
No, I just wanted for the listeners to.
Sure.
I mean, I don't want them to hate me after the first 1 or 2 episodes.
But I mean, yeah, you make an excellent point. Everything that they've done has been really impressive, and it's such a feat that no one else has copied it. I mean, honestly and truly, even DC.
Well, they've copied it, but they haven't replicated
they haven't succeeded.
it.
Yeah, they've attempted. They've seen the dollar sign saying, "Gotta have a universe. Gotta have a universe. We gotta plan 500 sequels and everything." But they're not realizing it's not that they're planning everything ahead of time. They had a plan in the moment to say, okay, what could it take to get to this point? Well, we got to introduce some characters. Great, let's do that. Let's start there first. And then we're going to have all these movies that introduce characters. And then we're going to have them team up. But all these things are separate plans. The problem with these people is they're thinking, well, we have to say, well, here's an Easter egg here, and then that's going to lead up to this movie. And then you got to plan an Easter egg there, and then that's another movie right there. Focus on your movie. Focus on right here. So, to your point, Marvel's success has shifted the perception in the studio system as to what makes money. And they're not focused on making good content, just how much content can we make out of one thing and what universe can we build from. And then that's just like nothing else takes precedent. It's like you have an idea, can it turn into a universe? Great, we want it, and that's what we're going to take. Because it has, the more I'm sitting here talking it through, it's true. It's so true. Even the littlest thing.
And you see it too with the success of the Hunger Games. After that, it was like YA movie after YA, or like they were trying to buy up all of and trying to replicate that, which never happened. It was really like the Hunger Games was the only one that worked. Mm-hmm. But you saw them chasing that trend.
It's true.
But speaking about the theater business, aside from those huge blockbuster movies, I feel like with mainstream theaters, your AMCs, your Regals, and whatever it is regionally around the country, the only other kinds of movies that get released are from established, known directors who have the clout, who have earned, so to speak, the right to keep making movies that are outside of the big IPs, mm-hmm. whether that's Steven Spielberg or Clint Eastwood or whoever it might be, people who've been around for decades, generations even,
right.
Scorsese, they can still make movies that get released in theaters. But what's interesting to me is that take some of these directors who are making Marvel movies now, their reason they're making Marvel movies is because they made some kind of cool indie film. But nobody saw those indie films that they made in the theaters. Mm-hmm. They weren't released in the theaters, or they were released at such a small limited run, like in New York or Los Angeles, or they, played the festivals or something. I'll probably butcher his name, but like Taika Waititi, who did one of the Thor movies, he made Hunt for the Wilder People. We didn't see that movie in the theaters. It wasn't released here.
That's true,
but it came to streaming or something.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kinds of movies that previously, in the 80s, 90s, and then going back throughout history, they would be released in theaters and people would go see them or they wouldn't go see them. But theaters had a full slate of films, and they had like these little, small budget, mid budget, B movies even, and then they had big spectacle movies. But now it's like we only get the spectacle movies, or we get movies from like the really established directors who have been around for 30 years already, and 30, 40 years even.
Right. I mean, to even piggyback off of that, Chloe Zhao,
mm-hmm.
who won Best Director for Nomadland, correct?
Yeah.
She's directing their movie that's coming out in November, The Eternals.
Absolutely. That's how it goes. And nobody's seen her movies in the theaters.
Exactly.
None of her movies have been released in mainstream theaters in the majority of the country.
Mm.
New York, Los Angeles, you could probably have gone to see some of her movies in the theaters, but here in Tennessee, no.
No, exactly.
I mean, maybe at the Bell Court, which is this, the local independent theater that shows small movies, but no, you couldn't have gone to the Regal or the AMC theater here and seen any of her movies before.
No.
And now she's directing the Invincibles?
The Eternals.
Eternals.
Mm.
One of those.
One of those things. So with that said, I mean, the fact that studios are now kind of focused in on trying to create these event movies for people to go to the theater, because, I mean, whether you believe it or not, I mean, the event movies are kind of nice on the big screen. I want to see those. Like, I wish I could have seen Godzilla vs. Kong on the big screen, despite how I felt about it afterwards.
Yeah.
I wish I could have seen it on the big screen.
They gained something from that. Absolutely. Yeah. It's totally different seeing them in the theater than seeing them, even if you have an amazing setup, if you have like a theater room, if you have that much money, it's still not the same.
No, it's not. So do you feel that maybe... Do you think it would benefit some of these smaller movies to just forego the theaters?
No, I think they should be seen in theaters, because they are foregoing the theaters now. That's the only place that anybody can actually see them is at home.
Mm.
But I think there's something about, movies, they're about, I'm about to super overgeneralize here, but something about the lights going down, the big screen, the popcorn, whatever it is, and just being around people. And seeing and watching a movie, or even just seeing it by yourself. If you go to a movie and nobody else is in the theater, the movie benefits. I went and saw Steven Soderbergh is another one, a director who could still get movies in the theater, even though nobody went to watch them. It was the movie Unsane, which he shot on the iPhone. Mm. I went and watched that in one of the big theaters, and there were probably 4 people in the whole theater. It benefited from that because watching it at home just feels like TV.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but they just gain some sort of monumentality. The people are bigger than life. The stories become bigger than life.
Mm-hmm.
Or they just
It's
gain I think you just pay more attention. It's so hard for me to watch a whole film at home from start to finish because I have so many other things that I could do. Whereas I've never walked out of a movie in the theater. You just
I don't
watch
think
it.
I have
You,
either,
even
yeah.
if it sucks, you're still engaged by it. You're just still enthralled by it. Something about being there
Mhm.
changes the experience. And like watching at home, I'll just stop watching it and go do something else, and then come back tomorrow and watch the rest of it. Or
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. For me, pausing a movie is not an option in the theater. You know,
Mhm.
like I'm not leaving to go.
Yeah, think about how
pee.
many times you had to pee and you're just like,
Yeah.
damn it. Like, and then you have to make a really hard decision. Am I going
Yeah.
to pee and miss something, or am I going to tough it out and hope that I can make it? That's not,
Yeah.
you don't have that dilemma at home.
Right, because you're just like, I'm done, and not being distracted. When I'm in the theater, my phone is up. When they put that little sign up that says "Turn off your phone," done. I'm out because I'm trying to be respectful. I came here to watch a movie. I assume everybody else did too. So put your phones away. And of course, not everybody listens, but you kind of hope and wish. It's the communal experience. Watching, even to your point, there is something else to seeing it with a smaller crowd. It's still a communal experience because you're with people who are there to really take this in, or at least that's what you hope. The last time I had a full communal experience, and funny enough, it was kind of used in Marvel's big promotion for all their movies coming back out. I don't know if you saw that trailer, but they showed like a fan screening of Endgame, and it was just like everybody cheering and everything like that. I had that experience in the theater. You know, people were happy, people were cheering, people were crying, and you feel like you're part of something. And I know that's not going to be for every movie, but in that moment, we were all united. Like we all were cheering for our heroes. We were all feeling sad when something bad happened. The entire room, we're all together on this journey, and it was something unique. It's something I'm so glad that I was a part of that I couldn't get at home. And this is exactly why I hope theaters never die. And no matter whether I'm going to watch a smaller movie or a bigger movie, that group experience. I mean, I know that there are going to be bad actors sometimes that ruin the experience for people. But overall, I really hope that the people who are there, when I'm sitting in the theater, they're all here for the same purpose I am, to enjoy this movie, to soak it up and just love it.
But even that becomes part of the thing that you talk about afterward.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so the thing about going to the theater is it is an experience. You know, it is something that you consciously go out and do. You have to get dressed. You have to leave your house, and whatever happens there is just part of it. It's part of the experience, and like you don't get it when you just watch it at home. Which isn't to say, like, I am all about all the options. I love being able to watch all of these movies that I didn't get to go see at the theater at home. I mean, I grew up during VHS era and then the DVD era, and like being able to watch the movies at home, you know, we've been doing that our whole lives. So it's not like one or the other, but it's like there is a difference, and people might have a preference for one or the other, but it's not the same experience. And I do think that movies benefit from the theater experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Oscars were so reluctant to acknowledge films that, or the Cannes Film Festival. They didn't want anything to do with movies that didn't play in the theaters, because that's what movies are.
Yeah.
I don't know. It should be that way.
Yeah, I don't want to dismiss any streaming services or movies that go to streaming services, because there are a lot of good ones out there that had to forego theaters.
Well,
and,
not every movie can. Yeah, not every movie can play the theaters, or people need an outlet for the movies that they make, and you know, there are gates, there are barriers of entry to getting in the theater, and that's not to. There's always been movies that went straight to VHS since that became a format.
yeah.
So, or straight to DVD, and I'm not. Yeah, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of good ones out there, and this is coming from a place where sometimes options are a little difficult. As much as I would love to go watch a movie in theaters, most of the time say, for example, I think I'd mentioned Black Widow would be the one that I would love to go back to. Like that would be my jumping off point back to theaters because it's an event movie. I've never missed a Marvel movie. I want to go back. This will be the one. Even though A Quiet Place 2 would probably be a great one to go right back to right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's another one I'm kind of wishing that I could find the time for. And I don't know if I don't think it's available on any kind of early access platform right now, A Quiet Place 2. But if it was, I feel like a part of me might go ahead and pay the $20.
Right.
Simply because I don't know if I'll be able to get out for it. And I know that could hurt a theater. And it kind of puts me in a bind. But if I can't get out, I still kind of want to,
Well, that's the other piece to this, like the financial part or the business aspect of it that I was reading about today, where theaters kind of missed the boat with streaming because prior to, the theaters negotiate with the studios for these windows. There used to be like, up until recently, there was a 90-day window that movies had to show in theaters for 90 days before they were allowed to go to other platforms.
Mm-hmm.
That's been relaxed with COVID, and they were even prior to COVID, like this agreement was being negotiated, and theaters now find themselves in a much weaker bargaining spot because they are desperate to get content. So now that the studios and the big platforms have like all the bargaining power. But I was reading this article that was talking about theaters really need to be proactive and say, let us, we need a piece of that VOD. Or we need a piece of that streaming window. We need to get some of that money so that we can stay, that's viable for us. Or else they're going to keep struggling. If studios keep pushing everything to streaming or video on demand right away, as opposed to giving the theaters the window, the theaters need to get a cut of that, something, so that they can stay in business.
Do you think this will hurt? Or do you think in the long term, I guess smaller theater chains will suffer and probably go under more than some of the bigger dogs? Because I feel like Regal and AMC could probably withstand a hit like this, even though they've been struggling. They could eventually find their way out of it. But
they have the connection. They've got the bargaining power. It's all those kinds of things to get movies back in. I think the smaller theater chains, like, this is an opportunity for them. And I'm not in the business, so I could be totally off base here. But
sure,
to start maybe reaching into the back catalog and trying to find different things to show. But I don't know how you draw people in. If there's a whole marketing aspect to it. How do you get people to show up to something that's not being pushed on all the other big platforms, that isn't getting trailers, that's not on TV? So, yeah, I mean, it's tough. They have to be able to show something that somebody in their area wants to see. In Nashville, Tennessee, it's we have the Belcourt Theater, which has enough of a following that they can show those small movies and people will come out to see them. But you can't necessarily do the same thing in rural areas. People don't know about those movies and they won't come out to the local. Nobody just goes. That's another different thing too. I feel like in the past people would just go to the movies not knowing what they were going to see. They would just go and say, what's available and let's pick one. Almost like when you went to Blockbuster and you didn't know what the hell you were going to rent. You just strolled the aisles or trawled the aisles and eventually settle on something. People used to do that when they actually went to the movies. They didn't even have a movie in mind. So that's totally different now. Nobody goes to the movies anymore and doesn't know what the hell they want to see.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know how we get back to that or if it's even possible. So for those smaller movie chains, those regional movie chains, I don't know what the answer is if they're totally cut out and the big movies are going right to streaming. If they don't have that window anymore, I don't know. Yeah. It'll just be up to the movie buffs or the real theater buffs who just really want to go see them in those theaters.
And that's where I get hesitant to pay for on demand because I don't want to contribute to something like that. If I know that my purchase or my rental fee is not helping the theater chain and I was responsible for taking it down, I kind of feel guilty about it, Whether or not I know I'm just one small piece of the very large puzzle, but I don't want to see them go down. I mean, it's nice having a theater. I remember having a local theater in a town I used to live in, like when I was a kid, and I honestly don't remember when it closed, but it closed pretty early on in my childhood to where it was non-existent. But I remember it being there, you know. So I don't want to see that happen again. You know, streaming is fine for what it is, but I want to be able to get out. People want to be able to get out. I think that's true whether or not we're antisocial or not. And I'm probably one of the biggest antisocial people I ever meet, but there are times I want to get out. I would like to be around other people. I truly hope that theaters survive. I do see streaming as a viable platform, but I don't want to see one overtake the other before it's all over with. I would like to have the option to do one or the other. And I feel like going straight to streaming, everything streaming, I don't know, we're losing something. You got anything else to add to this conversation, or are we ready to wrap it up?
No, I don't guess so. That's all I got. Sorry. Put me on the spot, and I just froze. So
it's fine. No, I hope everyone's enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure everybody's got their opinions. You can leave them in comments, hopefully, wherever we're posting these things, because they got things like that out there in the internet world. Tell us what you think. Leave reviews, do all that stuff. Hopefully we'll hear from you. We'll read them out on the show if that ever becomes a thing. If it doesn't, I don't care. It's fine.
Everything's fine. Nothing matters.
It's fine. We're just enjoying the conversation of talking about cinema, and hopefully you are too. Hopefully you're learning something, because I'm loving these conversations. I love that we're not just doing, hey, did you see that movie? Oh, it's a great movie.
I really did wish I watched that Zack Snyder movie, so we could have just talked about that for a little bit.
Well, you've got time.
Next week.
Next week. And next week, what are we talking about? We've got lists. I don't know. We haven't decided yet, so you just have to tune back in and find out. But until then, everybody, keep watching your movies, support your local theaters, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.